Chapter 2, Part 2. Okay, I'm going to show you the picture. That's how the other part 1 ended, when Victoria was at the shop giving her the list that her mom needed. And then there's that. Okay. Tristan hurried into the parlor and informed Mr. Brown that he would be off now, and Mr. Brown grunted, although not in the entirely ill-natured way, and told Tristan that when he was younger, he not only had to stay late each night and shut up the shop, but that he had also had to sleep on the floor beneath the counter with only his coat for a pillow. And Tristan agreed that he was indeed a lucky young man, and he wished Mr. Brown a good night. Then he took his coat from the coat stand and his new bowler hat from the hat stand and stepped out onto the cobblestone there where Victoria's Forrester waited for him. The autumn twilight turned into deep and early night as they walked. They could smell the distant winter on the air, a mixture of night mist and crisp darkness, and the tang of fallen leaves. They took a winding lane up toward the Forrester farm, and the crescent moon hung white in the sky, and the star burned in the darkness above them. Victoria, said Tristan after a while. Yes, Tristan, said Victoria, who had been preoccupied for much of the walk. Would you think it forward of me to kiss you? Asked Tristan. Yes, said Victoria, bluntly and coldly, very forward. Ah, said Tristan. They walked up to the Tidy's hill, not speaking. At the top of the hill they turned and saw beneath them the village of Wall. All gleamed candles and lamps, glimmering through windows, warm yellow lights, and beckoned and invited. And above them the lights of the myriad stars, which glittered and twinkled and blazed chilly in the distance, and more numerous than the mind could encompass. Tristan reached down his hand and took Victoria's small hand in his. She did not pull away. The only picture here. Did you see that? Asked Victoria. I saw nothing, said Tristan. I was looking at you. He was telling the truth. Victoria smiled in the moonlight. You're the most lovely woman in the world, said Tristan from the bottom of his heart. Get along with you, said Victoria. But she said it gently. What did you see? Asked Tristan. A falling star, said Victoria. I believe they are not at all uncommon at this time of year. Vicky, said Tristan. Will you kiss me? No, she said. You kissed me when you were younger. You kissed me beneath the pledge oak on your 15th birthday, and you kissed me last May Day behind your father's cowshed. It was another person then, she said, and I shall not kiss you, Tristan Thorne. If you will not kiss me, asked Tristan, will you marry me? There was a silence on the hill, only the rustle of the October wind, then a tinkling sound. It was the sound of the most beautiful girl in the world, in the whole of the British Isles, laughing with delight and amusement. Marry you, she repeated incredulously. And why ever should I marry you, Tristan Thorne? What could you give me? Give you, he said. I would go to India for you, Victoria Forrester. tusk of elephant, and pearls as big as your thumb, and rubies the size of orangutan's eggs. I would go to Africa and bring you diamonds the size of cricket balls. I would find the source of the Nile and name it after you. I would go to America, all the way to San Francisco, to go to the gold fields, and I would not come back until I had your weight in gold. Then I would carry it back here and lay it at your feet. I would travel to the distant Northlands. Did you but say the word, and slay mighty polar bears, and bring you back their hides? I think you were doing quite well, said Victoria Forster, until you got to the bit about slaying polar bears. Be that as it may, little shop boy and farm boy, I shall not kiss you, neither shall I marry you. Tristan's eyes blazed in the moonlight. I would travel to far Cathay for you and bring you a huge junk. I would capture from the king of the pirates leaden and jade and silk and opium. I would go to Australia at the bottom of the world, said Tristan, and bring you. He ransacked the penny dreadful in his head, trying to remember if any of their heroes had visited Australia. A kangaroo, he said, and opals, he said. He was fairly sure about the opals. Victoria Forrester squeezed his hand. And whatever would I do with a kangaroo? She asked. Now we should be getting along, or my father and mother will be wondering what has kept me, and they will leap to some entirely unjustified conclusion, for I have not kissed you, Tristan Thorn. Kiss me, he pleaded. There is nothing I would not do for your kiss. No mountain I would not scale, no river I would not ford, no desert I would not cross. He gestured widely, indicating the village of wall below them, the night sky above them. In the constellation of Orion, a star flashed and glittered and fell. For a kiss, and I pledge of your hand, said Tristan, grandiloquently, I would bring you the fallen star. He shivered. His coat was thin, and it was obvious he would not get his kiss, which he found puzzling. The mainly heroes of penny dreadful and shilling novels were never had these problems getting kissed. Go on then, said Victoria, and if you do, I will. What? Said Tristan. Them walking. It's a pretty picture. If you bring me that star, said Victoria, the one that just fell, another star, then I'll kiss you. Who knows what else I might do? There you need not go to Australia, nor Africa, nor too far Cathay. What? Said Tristan, and Victoria laughed at him, then and took back her hand and began to walk down the hill toward her father's farm. Tristan ran to catch her up. Do you mean it? He asked her. I mean it as much as you mean all your fancy words of rubies and gold and opium. What is an opium? Something is cough mixture, said Tristan, like eucalyptus. It does not sound particularly romantic, said Victoria Forster. Anyway, should you not be running off to retrieve my fallen star? It fell to the east over there. And she laughed again. Silly shop boy. It is all you can do to ensure that we have the ingredients for rice pudding. And if I brought you a fallen star, asked Tristan lightly, what will you give me? A kiss, your hand in marriage, anything you desire, said Victoria, amused. You swear it? Asked Tristan. They were walking to the last 100 yards, now up to the Forster farmhouse. The windows burned in lamplight, yellow and orange. Of course, said Victoria, smiling. The track of the Forster farm was bare mud. trodden into mere by the feet of the horses and cows and sheep and dogs. Tristan Thorn went down on his knees in the mud, heedless of his coat or his woolen trousers. Very well, he said. The wind blew from the east then. I shall leave you here, my lady, said Tristan Thorn, for I have urgent business to the east. He stood up, unmindful of the mud and the mere clinging to his knees, or mire, to his knees in coat, and bowed to her, and then doffed his bowler hat. I apologize, I'm really, really hungry, and my stomach is announcing it very loudly. But again, it wouldn't be me if I read to you not hungry. Victoria Forrester laughed, and the skinny shop boy laughed long and loud and delightfully, and her twinkling laughter followed him back to the hill and away. Tristan Thorn ran all the way home. Brambles snagged at his clothes as he ran, and the branch knocked his hat from his head. He stumbled, breathless and torn, into the kitchen of the house of Westward Meadows. Look at the state of you, said his mother. Indeed, I never did. Tristan merely smiled at her. Tristan, asked his father, who at 5 and 30 was still middling tall and still freckled, although there were more than a few silver hairs in his nut-brown curls. Your mother spoke to you. Did you hear her? I beg your pardon, father, mother, said Tristan, but I shall be leaving the village tonight. I may be gone for some time. Foolishness and silliness, said Daisy Thorn. I never heard such nonsense, but Dustin Thorn saw the look in his son's eyes. Let me talk to him, he said to his wife. She looked at him sharply, then she nodded. Very well, she said, but who's going to sew up this boy's coat? That's what I would like to know. She bustled out of the kitchen. The kitchen fire fizzed, silver and glimmered green and violet. Where are you going? Asked Dunstan. East, said his son. East, his father nodded. There were two east to the next county, to the forest, and east to the other side of the wall. Dustin Thorn knew without asking to which his son was referring. And will you be coming back? Asked his father. Tristan grinned widely. Of course, he said. Well, said his father, that's all right then. He scratched his nose. Have you given any thought to getting through the wall? Tristan shook his head. I'm sure I can find a way, he said. If necessary, I'll fight my way past the guards. His father sniffed. You'll do no such thing, he said. And how would you like it if it was up to you? It was you was on duty, or me. I'll not see anyone hurt. He scratched the side of his nose once more. Go and pack a bag and kiss your mother goodbye. I'll walk you down to the village. Tristan packed a bag, and his mother brought him 6 ripe apples and a cottage loaf and a round of white farmhouse cheese. Miss Thorne would not look at Tristan. He kissed her cheek and bade her farewell. Then he walked into the village with his father. Tristan had stood his first watch on the wall when he was 16 years old. Then had only been one instruction, and it was this. It is the task of the guards to prevent anything or anyone from coming through the village by any means possible. If it was not possible, then they must raise the village. He wondered what his father had in mind. Perhaps the two of them together would overpower the guards. Perhaps his father would create some kind of distraction and allow him to slip through. Perhaps. By the time they walked through the village beside the wall, Tristan had imagined every possibility except one which occurred. On the wall duty that evening were Harold Crutchback and Mr. Bromius. Harold Crutchback was a husky young man several years older than Tristan, the miller's son. Mr. Bromius was the innkeeper. His hair was black and curled, and his eyes were green, and his smile was white, and he smelled of grapes, and of grape juice, and of barley, and of hops. Dunstan Thorne walked up to Mr. Bromius and stood in front of him. He stamped his feet against the evening chill. "Evening, Mr. Bromius." "Evening, Harold," said Dunstan. "Evening, Mr. Thorne," said Harold Crutchback. "Good evening, Dunstan," said Mr. Bromius. "I trust you're all well." Dunstan Thorne aloud asked that he was, and they spoke of the weather and agreed that it would be bad for the farmers, and from the quantity of holly berries and jewberries already apparent, it would be a cold, hard winter. Tristan was ready to burst with irritation and frustration, but he bit his tongue and said nothing. Finally, his father said, "Mr. Bromius, Harold, I believe you both know my son Tristan." Tristan raised his bowler hat to them nervously, and then his father said something he did not understand. "I suppose you both know about where he came from," said his father. Mr. Bromius nodded without speaking. Harold Crutchback said he had heard tales, although you never should mind the half of what you hear. "Well, it's true," said Dunstan Thorne, "and now it's time for him to go back." "There's a star," Tristan began to explain, but his father hushed him to silence. Mr. Bromius rubbed his chin and ran a hand through his thatch of black curls. "Very well," he said. He turned and spoke to Harold in a low voice, saying things Tristan could not hear. His father pressed something cold into his hand. "Go on with you, boy. Go and bring back your star, and may God and all his angels go with you." And Mr. Bromius and Harold Crutchback, the guards on the gate, stood aside and let him pass. Tristan walked through the gate with the stone wall on each side of him into the meadow on the other side of the wall. He turned and looked at the three men framed in the gap and wondered why they had allowed him through. Then, his bag swinging in one hand and the object his father had pushed into his hand in the other, Tristan Thorne set up the gentle hill towards the woods, and as he walked, the chill of the night grew less, and once in the woods at the top of the hill, he was surprised to realize the moon was shining brightly down on him through the gap in the trees. Surprised because the moon had set an hour before, and doubly surprised because the moon that had set had been a slim, sharp silver crescent, and the moon that shone down on him now was a huge golden harvest moon, full and glowing and deeply colored. That gold thing in his hand chimed once, a crystalline tinkling like the bells of a tiny glass cathedral. He opened his hand and held it up in the moonlight. It was a snowdrop made all of glass. A warm wind stroked Tristan's face and smelled like peppermint and black currant leaves and red ripe plums, and the enormity of what he had done descended on Tristan Thorne. He was walking into fairy in search of a fallen star, with no idea how he would find the star, nor how to keep himself safe and whole as he tried. Though he looked back and fancied that he could see the lights on the wall behind him, wavering and glimmering as he gazed, but still inviting. And he knew that if he turned around and went back to one, no one would think any less of him for it. Not his father, nor his mother, or even Victoria Forrester would likely as not merely smile at him the next time he saw him and called him shop boy, and add that stars at once fallen often proved difficult in the finding. He paused then, and he thought of Victoria's lips and her gray eyes in the sun of her laughter. He straightened his shoulders, placed the crystal snowdrop in the bottom hole of his coat, now undone, and too ignorant to be scared, too young to be awed. Tristan Thorn passed beyond the fields we knew and into Fairy. And that's the end of chapter 2. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please don't forget to subscribe, give me a thumbs up, share, comment, hit the bell for notification, follow me on Instagram, and I will talk to you in my next video. Bye guys.